Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and this acrylic paint tutorial is going to show you how to paint a wagon wheel with different kinds of flowers. So we have lavender, vine, wildflowers, sunflowers with a rustic wagon wheel. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the colors and brushes that I use for this painting. Feel free to sub and use whatever brushes and colors you have available. I used a 3/4 inch flat wash brush, a number 4 round brush, and a number 12 bright brush. So this bright brush is like a 1/2 inch flat brush. And for the colors, I used Hooker's Green Hue Permanent, Brilliant Yellow Green, Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue, Dioxazine Purple. You can use any other purple that you might have. It doesn't have to be that one. Mars Black, raw umber, and burnt sienna. So we need like a reddish brown and kind of like a cool brown to so 2 different browns, because we have the wagon wheel against like a wooden post, so you need 2 different kinds of browns for that, and titanium white and blue gray. So blue gray, if you don't have it, you can just use any light blue color, or if you want the background like the sky area to be gray, you can do gray and add a little bit of blue into it. A Posca black paint pen is optional for this. Let's go ahead and get our palette ready with titanium white, Hooker's Green Hue Permanent, Brilliant Yellow Green, and Blue Gray. We're going to paint the first layer of the painting, which includes the sky, and the first layer of the grass area. I'm using a 3/4 inch flat brush, and I'm loading it in the water and kind of tapping it dry, but still leaving a generous amount of water on the brush. I'm going to apply my blue gray, so that water that's on the brush, just going to kind of thin it out a little bit. I'm going to grab titanium white. It's about equal parts white and that blue gray color. I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to paint my sky area. I'm going to go almost all the way down my canvas for this, but starting at the top, and I'm doing kind of loose angled strokes that are not going left and right. They're kind of going in different directions. So I'm just using the full width of my bristles on my brush, and I'm painting in angles. I'm kind of blending on the canvas, so I'm not blending my colors all the way on the palette as I'm loading. As you work your way down, let's have our sky get a little bit lighter as we go towards the bottom horizon line area. So the bottom part of the sky that meets the grass, it's a lot lighter in that area. So let's just add more white as we work our way down. But look at these long angled strokes, kind of expressive, going in different directions. If you want more of like if you don't like the look of the strokes kind of going in angles, I like that look. It kind of gives it more interest. But if you want it just to be a solid color, you can just paint solid, or have your strokes go completely left to right to make kind of a gradient. So when you get to about the halfway point in the sky, you want to make sure you add a whole bunch of white in that area. So we really want to get this part to lighten up, because we're going to be transitioning to our green color. So let's get some more titanium white on our palette and load our brush. A whole bunch of white. So down here, we have a lot of white. So this is about the halfway point, a little bit lower than the halfway point actually. And lots of white in that area, blended up into the blue so it doesn't look like it just all of a sudden changes. We want it to blend gently. And bring this down. We still have kind of a gap towards the bottom, about a third, like 1/3 of the way up, or maybe a 1/4 of the way up. Let's just drag this white down a little bit further. It's okay if you end up going all the way down. This lighter color will blend with our green regardless. So we can take this white, and it's so light down here, it almost just kind of fades out into the white part of the canvas. So a lot of white down there. And then let's go ahead and, without rinsing the brush, let's grab our Brilliant Yellow Green. So this is going to blend nicely because of all the white that's already there, the titanium white. So little bits of that really light yellowish green And I'm doing kind of the same thing, only this is green. So I'm just letting this part of the sky transition into this grassy area that's kind of way in the distance. And still angled strokes, but these strokes are kind of going more kind of vertical, but still kind of slanted diagonal, using the full width of the brush. I'm not intentionally making it look like grass, but knowing that there's going to be grass there, I'm just kind of making it so those strokes go kind of more sticking up vertically versus laying flat. So I did a layer of the lighter green, and then let's grab our dark green. That's the Hooker's Green Hue Permanent. Start at the bottom and then blending that up into our lighter green. Same kind of strokes, but still going more vertically than horizontally with it. So if I drag my brush kind of more up, it is going to kind of create the impression that there's grass in that area. So full width of the stroke, dragging it up, letting it just gently blend with that lighter green. I'm not trying to get rid of that lighter green. The lighter green is way in the distance. It's going to create some depth in our sort of landscape scene that we're creating. So dragging those strokes up, kind of vertical, slightly diagonal to the left and the right, making a variety of those different strokes. And then adding another layer of that darker green down here at the bottom to create that slightly darker towards the bottom, lighter towards the top look that gives our area some perspective. So this looks good. I decided I wanted to get my lighter green to kind of blend a little bit more with my darker green. So I went back here where that dark green meets the light green, and I just grabbed my lighter green. There's still a little bit of that dark green on my brush. I'm just going back here with kind of a shorter layer, kind of an in-between green color between our super light green and our other green, darker green. So I'm just going back here at the top, and then I had to go back down and add more layers that overlap that, and then back down here another darker layer that overlaps that. So short strokes, each kind of row sort of overlaps each other. And then later on, we can add some more detailed paint strokes with a round brush to create some more actual defined grass blades. But for now, this is that layer that we're just going to let this be and dry before going on to the next step. So once your sky and grass area have dried, we're going to go ahead and measure out our post that our wagon wheel is kind of leaning against. And you don't have to use these exact measurements, but if you love measurements, you know where you're going. It's about 3.5 inches wide. So you can take a ruler, measure 3.5 inches wide, and draw a vertical line. So I'm making about 3 little marks, one at the top, I did one at the bottom, and then one towards the middle, 3.5 inches. So I can get this to line up. You can also use a T-square ruler for this to make it lined on the edge of the canvas. Do a vertical line. This is just a regular pencil. And then from the bottom, that little horizontal line is about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches. That also doesn't have to be exact, but you want to leave space at the bottom of that post so that we can paint the bottom of our wagon wheel, some lavender later on. On my palette, I have raw umber, and you want to freshen up some titanium white. So this raw umber is a really dark, cool brown, and you want to load, let's go ahead and load raw umber, but then a little bit of white on our brush too. We're going to paint this entire post using the 3/4 flat, but we want to make sure all our strokes are going vertical. You can use the tip of the brush, like I am here, to outline the edging of it, but everything in the middle You're just using the full width of the brush and you're just dragging it upwards. And we're letting that white blend gently with our brown, but not blending it all the way. If I kept brushing this, eventually I'm just going to get a solid lighter brown shade. But we want to create the impression that this is a wooden post. So letting those vertical streaks of paint stay in there gives it that faux sort of wood grain look. And then, so right here on the edge, you can use the tip of the brush. So hold the brush vertically to use that tip to cut in on that shape, and then fill it in using the full width of the brush. So some areas of this wooden post are a little bit darker. We'll have more darker shades of the brown, some lighter with more of the lighter color. But I'm not going to keep working that. I'm just going to let that be. Let's let that dry just a little, but it doesn't have to dry all the way for this next step. Let's go ahead and get a round brush. Let's add some detail work to the wood post, some more intentional wood grain pieces. We're not going for super hyper realism, but we can still add some wood texture in there that looks really pretty. So this is the number 4 round brush, and let's make a very light brown color. I'm adding a little bit of water to the brush, kind of thin it down a bit. We don't want it to be watercolor consistency, but just a teeny bit of water because I'm going to be painting some detailed lines in here, and it helps if the paint's a tad thinner. Twisting your brush also helps get that paint right there on the tip of the brush. And I'm doing little vertical strokes to create the impression that this is intentional wood grain. I can do little knots, so I can do kind of these curved style strokes and then contour a few strokes around that initial sort of curve. So just kind of painting, making sure that everything's still going vertically, and that is that intentional wood grain. Those strokes add to that first layer that we blended. We can also use, so we don't have to use this lighter color throughout. If we want to, we can do darker. So I'm just going to add darker inside of those wood knots that I painted. But I can do some darker grained strokes as well. Keep in mind that the wagon wheel, we don't really know the placement of our wagon wheel yet, but a lot of the spokes of the wheel are going to be covering some of this. So don't go super hyper detail realistic, and then it ends up being covered anyway. So just a few knots here and there, and it's still going to show through the wagon wheel. We're just not sure of the placement yet. So let's go ahead, we can add few more darker pieces down here. It's a little bit more darker and shadowy down here. We're going to need to let this dry before going on to the next step, and you're going to need to locate, if you have a paper plate that's about 9 inches in diameter, that's perfect, or any kind of circle you have that's 9 inches in diameter. If you're using a bigger canvas, you'll need a bigger circle. Smaller canvas, you'll need a smaller circle. But I found that a 9-inch paper plate, these are just cheap paper plates from Walmart, is perfect to get this circle. You can use a compass too. Compasses are fine. And let's let this, so we can position our wagon wheel. Let's let it go kind of off the canvas to make it look a little bit more interesting. You can make it go off the canvas more if you want. If you even wanted to do like a 10-inch or 11-inch circle, you probably can get away with that too. But that first circle is all that I felt like I needed to get this started. If you want to draw the rest of the wagon wheel, you can. I'm just going to show you how to paint this without kind of needing to draw the rest. We'll end up drawing the spokes, but this first layer, that one line is all we really need for this. So this is the 12 bright brush, and the width of this brush is 1/2 inches, and that's enough to get us started to get this circle to be more of a form, like a donut shape. And what I'm doing, and it helps if you add this is just Mars Black, so you just need the color Mars Black on your palette first. We're not worried about the brown yet. Our first layer of this wagon wheel is going to be solid black. And we're going to go around. This is the inside of that circle that we drew. And I'm just dragging my brush. I'm using the width of the brush to make that initial line that I drew into more of a donut shape. And I'm dragging it around, and that, again, that paint stroke is on the interior of that circle. And I'm just taking my time and kind of dragging that around using the width of the brush to make that circle into more of a form. If you're finding that the black is not flowing or that you're just constantly having to reload the brush, add just a very, very small amount of water into the black. Don't water it down too much, otherwise it's going to drip down on your canvas and mess everything up. A little bit of water helps with the flow. Really take your time. It's a little bit of a tedious step, but just keep in mind that this is only the first layer. We'll add our brown texture on it later, enough to kind of cover any flaws with our circle if it's not a perfect circle. And also it's a rustic wagon, so it does not have to be perfect. It could be that the wood is splinted in some areas, or bending or bowing because of water damage. We can think of it that way. And just try to get this. So what I'm doing here is I'm making the wheel a little bit more. I'm gradually adding more thickness into the wheel. If I measured my final results of the painting, the width of that part is more like 3/4 of an inch versus 1/2 an inch. So if we use the full width of the brush throughout, it's a 1/2 inch brush. But the wheel is more like 3/4 of an inch. Again, does not have to be 3/4 inches all throughout, because it's okay if we're not making it perfect all throughout. So to get it to be a little bit thicker, I can kind of turn my brush on this side and use just more of the tip of the brush to gradually add more thickness into this. So I noticed, like, towards the bottom of my wheel, it wasn't super even, and it's kind of thicker in some areas. That is going to actually be disguised later on with my grass blades, so that's fine. I didn't go back and try to fix it. I am going to draw the center piece and the spokes with a pencil. I feel that's kind of gives us sort of a roadmap of where we're going. If you feel confident and want to just paint it in, you're welcome to do that. But this is a pencil, and kind of estimating where the center is. I didn't really measure it, but I'm just going to kind of guess here. Again, rustic wheel doesn't have to be perfect. I drew a donut, so a smaller circle, and then kind of a larger circle outside of that. For the spokes, let's go ahead and mark the tops and bottoms of that circle. So I did one mark at the top, one mark at the bottom, one mark on the left, one mark on the right. That helps divide that up so that we can get the spacing of our spokes relatively even. And then these are lines that are a little bit thinner towards that center circle and then go wider. This is just a sketch. I'll paint these in differently when I go and paint, but this is just helps give me kind of a roadmap of where I'm going. And then in between each of those, I did another spoke. So another little mark in between the first set of marks. And that gives you a total of 8 wagon wheel spokes. So when we have that kind of sketched out and ready to go, let's go back. Let's use our number 4 round brush for this. This helps give us paint the smaller areas, but gives us more control in our painting. And I started with the center little donut shape, and I'm just painting that solid. Because I didn't trace this circle, ended up being a little bit wobbly at first, but again, that's okay. Leaving the center part open so you can see through it. And then I'm going to do each individual spoke. So I am not going to follow my sketch exactly because my drawing isn't very even throughout. But each spoke is a little bit thinner towards the center and a little bit thicker on the edge. So I'm going to do one at a time. I'm still using solid black right now. I'm not doing any color, any brown yet. So let's do the bottom one. Again, a little bit thinner towards the center, a little bit thicker towards the edge. These two are going more vertical. Little bit of water in there, but not too much if the paint's not flowing as well. And then we'll do the side ones. Thinner towards the center, a little bit thicker. So when you get to the edge part of the circle, you can press kind of harder on your brush to make a thicker stroke. And then when you get to the diagonal ones, I found the diagonal ones, the ones that go in between the first set, a little bit tricky. If you hold your canvas different ways versus if you're painting on an easel or flat on a table, it kind of helps so you can get that angle in there right. So you just kind of turn and hold your canvas. I find that really helpful. This one came out good. Another diagonal one. Again, make sure it's a little bit thinner towards the center, but then thicker when you get to the circle, making this donut part a little bit thicker. So this spoke ended up being a lot thicker than the rest. Again, that's okay. When we add the texture in there, we can kind of disguise the fact that it got really big, but also it doesn't have to be perfect. So this one also ended up being a little bit bigger than the other ones as well. So if that happened to you, don't worry, it's fine. So there we go. I can go in and maybe add some thickness to some of the other ones. We do not need to wait for this black to dry. In fact, it's kind of to our advantage that it still stays kind of wet. If it has dried for you, that's also fine. So dry or no dry, we can still go on to this next step. This is burnt sienna. So it's a reddish brown, and it's a different brown from the brown that we used in the post, so that we can, because it's brown against brown, we still want it to kind of stand out. You can see how this reddish brown contrasts against that post in the background. So what we're going to do is we're still using the number 4 round brush, and we're loading it in that reddish brown color, that burnt sienna color, and we're going to do the spokes first. So highly, highly recommend painting the texture of the spokes first, because the other parts are, the way we're painting it is it's overlapping that center and the edge, and then we can go back and paint over that. So we're basically just doing kind of the wood grain thing that we did earlier with the vertical post, only the direction of the wood grain needs to go in that angled direction of the spoke. So we're taking that reddish brown, we're doing those kind of left and right long strokes. If the black is blending with it, that's fine. We're not trying to cover up 100% of that black. That black is that underlayer, and we still want to use that black as like that darker part of our wagon wheel wood grain texture. So we want a lot of that black still showing through. So as you're painting each of these spokes, we're not covering it 100%. We're letting that show through. And each of the spokes I'm not making them consistent. So maybe one might have more reddish brown, one might have barely any, so one might end up being darker. Also use your titanium white in there as well. So adding, just be really, really careful not to add too much white, but adding little tiny bits of white into your reddish brown is going to add some to the wood grain effect, some pretty texture in there. So basically, we're just doing long strokes the whole width of that spoke, letting our burnt sienna, our white, and if there's black still showing, letting that blend very gently, and that's creating that wood grain look, that really pretty texture in there. And it's okay if our stroke paints over that middle piece or the end circle, because we'll go back and paint over that. Next, I'm going to paint that center circle piece and go over any of the parts of the spokes that I overlapped. So right here, using that reddish brown color, just take that and go around in a circular direction. Pretty much the same technique, only we're going in that rounded direction, not trying to cover up all of the black. We can even use a little bit of white. So right here, I'm going to take that white and add the white on the right side of this, kind of blend it in, and on the inner left part of this. Gives that a little bit of a 3D look when you do that. And then trying not to overblend. So now that is overlapping our spoke pieces, and then we can start doing the outer circle. Same exact technique, only we're going in that rounded direction. So I'm using the burnt sienna, the reddish brown color, going over my black, but not trying to cover all of the black. I can use little bits of white as well. I'll add little bits of white in there, kind of especially at the top part, so where that light would be hitting the wheel, and it would be a little bit more shadowy towards the bottom part. So we can kind of guess where maybe that part of the wheel would be lighter. So like right here on the right side it'd be lighter, but then on the left side it'd be darker. Just very gently adding that white in there, and you can see what's happening with that brown. It's giving it some dimension and some color variation. It's not super realistic, but it still looks pretty. Add a little bit more white over here on the right side. You want to kind of check to make sure you have enough contrast with our wheel that's laying against the post. So you don't want it to be the exact kind of brown. Obviously, we used a different brown, but it should be darker than the wood post, so enough for it to stand out. if it looks like the same brightness level, you can add more dark to the wheel that's overlapping the wood post. I'm going in and adding white kind of where that light would be hitting it on the right, and kind of blending it back in. Kind of the trick with this is to not over blend, so you're applying the color, letting it blend gently, but not over blending it. And then I loaded my brush in the black. I know the palette is kind of hidden on the right, but I grabbed Mars Black. I'm just taking this circle and kind of condensing it a little bit so it's smaller, but there's still a little bit of an opening right there. We can see part of the sky, or depending on how you drew your wheel, it might be that you see the wood post behind that, and that's fine too. I'm going to go ahead and use the white and mix white with a little bit of burnt sienna, so a lighter burnt sienna color. I'm going to go in with some of this lighter, go over here on the right, and a little bit more highlight right here on the right. Again, this is white and burnt sienna. Just a little bit of lighter color. Very lightly. I'm not trying to cover up all the dark, just giving it some more dimension by doing this. And then on the upper part of some of these spokes, or the center part of the spokes, give those some lighter color, some more dimension. A little bit on the bottom part of the wheel here. Bottom part, just very, very lightly over our darker color. And then I went in once with some black, so I didn't rinse my brush off, and I grabbed a little bit of black, just kind of outlining the side of some of these spokes, just on one of the edges right here. It kind of helps get it to stand out. You can also loosely outline the edges of the spokes with a paint pen, especially like right here where that brown is similar, to get it to stand out better. Just very, very loose outlining. You don't have to outline all of them, just on kind of one side. Helps with the edging of it. Let's go ahead and dry our painting so that we can erase. If you drew this and you have pencil marks still showing, we can go ahead and erase those after this is all dry. So this is dried. I erased my pencil marks, and we're going to go ahead and start doing all of our detail work, the grass, the flowers around our wagon wheel. Let's start off by loading our palette with Hooker's Green Hue Permanent, and let's use a very nice clean number 4 round brush. Got all that brown. Should have rinsed my water but didn't. But I'm adding a teeny tiny bit of black to our green to darken it. So let's start with a really dark green, slightly loose with water, but not too much water. Green tends to be a somewhat translucent color, so when you apply these, you're going to kind of see the wagon wheel through it. So you want to maybe do a couple strokes to get it to have coverage, and adding that little bit of black in there helps with that as well. Basically, we're just painting small little grass blades that are overlapping our wagon wheel. So for each grass blade, we're just kind of making a stroke and then kind of releasing the pressure of the brush. I'm going to do a mini demonstration of the brush with the painting grass blades. So it helps to load that paint right there on the tip of the brush. So if you kind of twist the brush when you load it, or make sure the paint is right there on the edge, and you do kind of a thicker stroke at first, so a little bit of pressure on the brush at first, and then you release. You can also add a little bit of water into the paint, but you don't want it to be watercolor consistency. But adding that little bit of water helps you helps to control the paint. So you're doing kind of painting your stroke like super fast, but pressure at first, but then quickly release the pressure. That gets your grass blade to be kind of thinned, and you're using very, very, very tip of the brush at the end of that grass blade. So you're doing little diagonal strokes. So you're just kind of layering it. You can layer each of the little grass blades over each other. And then in the painting itself, we're altering the colors. So the back layer part is darker. So we're using darker right now, but we'll layer on some lighter colors as well. So you're basically just doing that technique. And we're down here at the very bottom of our wagon wheel. And we're just creating clusters of those grass pieces to overlap. It makes it look like that wheel is nestled in the grass area. There will be a lavender flowers over here. So some of these grass blades I'm actually intentionally making larger to make it look like it's part of the lavender plant. So you can make some larger ones too. Let's add some brilliant yellow-green to our palette, and let's go and do some lighter color grass blades. So load that. I didn't rinse the brush off, so there's still the darker green on here. But again, the same thing, only this shows up lighter, so it's a lighter layer in there, but not trying to cover up all of the darker pieces. We want those darker pieces to still be showing between the lighter pieces. And then we can do some intentional longer blades. See how I kind of drag those further up so that those can be part of our lavender plant. So next, we are going to load our palette with Dioxazine Purple. So we'll be doing the lavender next. Let's completely rinse all that green off of the brush. We'll still be using a number 4 round brush for this, although you can use a Q-tip for this technique. I'm not going to demonstrate the Q-tip, but it is something that you can do instead of the round brush if you know how to do the Q-tip with the to create lavender. And titanium white. So we are going to be utilizing titanium white because the white is going to help brighten that white, but also create some really pretty color variation in our lavender. Let's go ahead and start with just the purple for now and make 2 little strokes on the end. So I'm using these long pieces to kind of start out with, but I can essentially do my lavender wherever and then make stems later. But each little stroke is just stroking up in kind of a diagonal direction and making them 1 row at a time. And as you go to reload the brush, you're going to grab different amounts of purple, different amounts of white, and you're just working your way down. As you do each little diagonal stroke, it's overlapping the previous set. So we can start another piece over here. I'm making my lavender pieces have a variety of heights, and they are kind of swaying different directions. So they're not all going at the same angle. Just doing little diagonal strokes overlapping the previous set of diagonal strokes and working your way down to form a column. So you're just doing, you can do as many as you want. This one's going to be a little bit higher. And we can decide if we want it to overlap or if we want it to just kind of go behind that one. And it's okay if you're doing a lavender and there's no stem attached to it. We can always go in and paint a stem if it needs a stem. But some of these, they don't really need to have an individual stem. So this one right here went all the way to the bottom of the edge of the canvas. We don't see the bottom part of it. This piece got cut off from the camera and I apologize for that, but I'm making another little lavender and you're going to see it in about 3 seconds here, but it's a lower one and it's going at a different angle. So there's that one. It's kind of going diagonally to the right. So there are going to be lavender on the right side of the painting, but we're not going to do those yet because we want to do what's behind them. There's 2 sunflowers over here on the right. And we're going to go ahead and paint the centers of the sunflowers first with raw umber and the number 4 round brush. So we're going to paint a half circle at the top and a half circle on the right. Both of those are going off the edge of the canvas. If you want to make your circles bigger because you want larger sunflowers, you can. In fact, I kind of wish I made mine larger because there's still a lot of space in this area. Could have definitely done larger sunflowers for this. I recommend for the petals that we paint the petals white first and then do yellow so that we have enough coverage. The sky's kind of a darker color, where if we just did yellow, it's not going to be super bright and yellow. It's just going to be kind of see-through. But you're basically just taking your number 4 round brush in titanium white, and you just draw out the petals. It's a little curved shape, with long curved shape with a point on the end, rounded at the base. And you're just doing petals all around each of your circles. Of course, we only see half of our sunflower here because our sunflowers are both on the edge of the canvas. And you're just drawing your shape out. It goes to a point, using just the tip of the brush to draw this and paint it. And then I can also do the petals that are behind. So those were just the front petals. If we want to do back petals, we can do back petals as well. So these kind of the same thing, only we don't see the bottom part of it because they're behind the front petals, but I'm just drawing out the shape of the petal and then filling it in solid. My white ended up getting a little bit of purple in it, but that was fine. So ideally you want to let the white dry before doing your yellow layer. So let's go ahead and do our stem and leaf. I'm just going to make this very, very simple, not super detailed or realistic. But basically this is the Hooker's Green Hue, with a little bit of that light green color. We're going to run into problems when we get to the grass. So we'll start at the flower and then go down to the grass. We'll lose our green right there because it's the same shade of green. So if we wanted to let that show up, we're just going to kind of let it be ambiguous where it's starting. But if we want it to show up better, we can add darker green to it. And then our leaf. So sunflowers have these sort of like heart-shaped large leaves. Again, I'm simplifying this, not making it look super realistic. So we can draw the shape of each of our leaves and then fill them in using that yellowish green color mixed with our darker color. Create some color variation. You can add some green, darker green in there and kind of let that blend with the rest of the leaf. I didn't detail these leaves as much because they're kind of in the background. Then we can go ahead and rinse our brush and load our palette with Cadmium Yellow Medium Hue. This is just the yellow that I grabbed. You can use literally any yellow for this. I like this one. It's kind of like an orangish yellow, kind of a golden yellow. Anyway, so we're using the 4 round brush, and let's go ahead and paint over our white petals that we did. So these are just the front petals right now, front petals first. I suppose we could have done back first, but it's okay. And so basically just outlining, filling it in solid. Your strokes are going in the direction of the petal. And then we can do our back petals. I am going to add a little bit of white to my yellow. So this is a lighter yellow. And I'm going to go back and add that to the front petals so that my front petals are lighter than my dark petals. So the front petals, a little bit of white mixed with yellow. So let's see how those stand out from our back petals, which would be darker. So we can do the same thing to the other sunflower, lighter yellow color. So yellow and white mixed together. You can do the front petals with that yellowish white color. And then we can do our back petals with more of that pure yellow color to make that so that the back petals are a little bit darker. I'm not making these sunflowers super detailed because it's not the focus of the painting. I could go in and make them super detailed, but they're kind of in the background, kind of an accent decorative piece to the painting. We did focus a lot of detail work on the wood grain of the wheel, so we can kind of be loose with the rest of it. So right here, I'm doing little white dots kind of inside the center of the flower to give that texture. And then I went back with just the brown. So right here, I'm going outside the lines of that circle. So that is overlapping the base of our petals. So right here, the brown, stippling the brush, kind of dabbing it to create that texture. and it overlaps the base of our petals for the sunflower center part of the flower texture. So next, I'm going to do kind of what I did on the lower left part of the painting, but do it on the right. I'm going to first add grass texture in that area, detailed grass texture, and then I'm going to add more lavender. So let's go ahead and I'm using the lighter green right in here to create grass blades. These ones ended up being larger, longer. So we're in the lower right part of our painting and doing that grass technique with the lighter green so it stands out against that darker area. And I could go in and add darker. So I mixed a little bit of that black with the green, a little bit of darker color down here, gives it variety of colors. So we have a lot of grass detail work, and let's see, maybe I can do this stem a little bit darker, but it still kind of is ambiguous of where it starts. It's somewhere in that grassy area is where the bottom of our sunflower plant is. But let's go ahead and do our lavender. Same technique. So rinse off the brush, grab your purple, and we'll just kind of figure out where some of these start. We can always paint stems later if we need stems for them. But we're doing our purple and white kind of back and forth. Little tiny curved diagonal strokes to create a column, one row at a time, and each one just kind of overlaps the other piece. This one's kind of a long one, but it's going at an angle. And then we'll do another little lavender over here going in a different direction. Maybe this one has some darker pieces to it. Another lavender over here. You just want to make variety of heights and making them go in different angles, and make sure you're doing a variety with the white. So some parts are lighter, some parts are darker. Creates that really pretty color variation. And maybe there's a smaller one down here, lower in the painting, and maybe it goes off the canvas. We'll do one more lavender piece over here on the right. The next thing I'm going to demonstrate is how to paint the vine that wraps around the top part of our wagon wheel. So I want to make sure that this is dry. It should be dry because we dried it earlier. Go ahead and rinse the brush. And we're going to be using green. So we want to let's start with our darker green. So the green on our palette that's kind of mixed with the black. We may have coverage issues because of it's dark. If we need to add a little bit of brilliant yellow, green, or white to it to get it to stand out, we can. But I'm just using the tip of the brush, and I'm painting the vine. It wraps around the wheel. So you want to pick it up at the part where it's going to go behind the wheel and then overlap the part that goes in front of the wheel. And then I did a really pretty spiral down here, just kind of goes in a circle direction as it kind of hangs down. And then I painted leaves. So simple, basic, rounded leaves. You can do a little stem. So you outline the leaf and then just fill it in. Again, if your green is not giving good coverage, especially in some of these darker areas, you'll want to add white or brilliant yellow green into the green that you're using. Brilliant yellow green is opaque enough where it's going to show up nice and bright. Versus if we just use the Hooker's Green Hue, it's too translucent and we would have to do multiple coats to get coverage, otherwise it would be see-through. I'm going back over that vine with a little bit of that lighter, brilliant yellow green Make sure that has good coverage. You can do as many leaves as you want. You can even add little flowers on your vine if you want flowers in the area too. We can do another little leaf over here. Just want to kind of be careful where you're adding your leaves. If you don't want to cover up a pretty part of the wheel that you worked hard on, then don't paint a leaf in that area. Or if there's something you want to disguise, you can paint a leaf in that area. Can add, I like to go on one side of my leaves. I do this a lot and add either a darker or a lighter color. So I'm just taking that darker green and on the one side, and that really creates some pretty contrast on the leaves. Doesn't make them look super realistic, but gives it some pretty color variation. It's like decorative painting, but not making it super realistic. Add a few more little grass blades down at the bottom with that lighter color. If you need to add some grass blades between some of your lavender, you can, or if parts of the lavender, maybe you see the bottom part and you want to add a stem to them, you can. Adding a little bit of lightness to one side of my sunflower leaves. The next little detail we're going to do to this painting is add little white 5-petal flowers in this. You're welcome to change the flowers in this if you want to do different colors, orange or pink. You are absolutely welcome to do that. I'm going to load my palette with titanium white and then use my number 4 round brush and just basically go in there and make little 5-petal flowers. You can do as many as you want. I did a total of, I'm going to do 5 flowers. They do not have stems. If you want them to have stems and leaves, you can, but these are just basically kind of floating around, and they can overlap parts of the lavender if needed. I'm just kind of scattering them throughout the bottom area of your painting. And then before they dried, I just took my raw umber, that darker brown color, little tiny dots right in the center. Very, very simple, very basic dots in the center of the flowers. Then I decided that I wanted to add more to my vine. So a few more leaves and then some more of the actual vine. So I took this, kind of extended it down this way, and we can go ahead and paint a few more leaves on that. And the one more detail I'm going to show you that you can do, this is completely optional. I mentioned the Posca black paint pen is optional for this, but if you wanted to kind of loosely outline the edges of your spokes with the black, or even like part of this circle, you can. It'll help create some contrast, especially if the wood's not standing out against the wood post behind it, or just areas where you feel like it just needs to be outlined slightly. I don't recommend outlining everything with a Posca paint pen, just very kind of loosely in some of the areas. So on the edge, kind of helps to define the edges of your spokes. it gives it more of that kind of a sharper look, especially on the edges. You can add a few little wood grain pieces, but I wouldn't go super detailed with that. And that is it. This is the conclusion of how to paint spring wagon wheel. Hope you enjoyed the techniques demonstrated in this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.